Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the third installment in this series on playing better fingerstyle blues guitar. And I'm going to try to keep the annoying snargle in my throat down to a minimum, but at least there's no chalk dust. When I taught summer workshops, I would talk all day and inhale chalk dust. So I've been talking for 3 days, but to quote Arlo Guthrie, I'm not tired or proud, but it's a little, try to keep that down to a minimum. Already some questions. All right. From Peter, at the end, could you do a slow walkthrough explanation of those slide up triads for slow ski me? Slow ski, that's great. I've never heard that before, but I love it. I am actually going to show some of those, some of these voicings in today's lesson. That's part of teaching this idea called the shout chorus. So sit tight. We'll probably cover, as like your elementary school teacher used to say to you and to me, like, those of you raising your hands, I'm pretty sure by the time I'm done, I may have answered your questions. But if I haven't, yeah, of course, I'll definitely talk about that. Mr. Petrichor asks, since I'm a newbie, what's the Fingerstyle 5? I'll let those of you in here who are already members of the Fingerstyle 5 handle that one for now. But the short answer is the Fingerstyle 5 is a monthly membership that I run where I teach public domain and original blues tunes and take all of them through this same process of teaching the tune, teaching the improvisation skills you need to play on it, and then teaching you how to arrange it into a complete song, which is the part that I'm going to demonstrate today. Spoiler alert, tomorrow in the afternoon, I'll be doing a live stream to walk anybody interested through. I'll do it on like a screen share and sort of walk you through what the membership looks like, what kind of tunes we do, what the content looks like, and all of that. But that's not till tomorrow. And really, these 3 lessons Thursday, Friday, and today are meant to stand on their own. And you can just, download the PDF, work through this material. It's probably a few months worth of stuff to work on already, what we've talked about. But feel free to just take these lessons for what they are at completely face value and just work on them. And if you are interested in spending more time learning more tunes in this same format, that's what the membership is for. Okay, so today we're going to look at arranging, which is one of those words that sounds sort of big and intimidating, but arranging just means, excuse me, what order are you going to put things in the song, and how are you going to build out a complete version of the song that would last for 2 or 3 minutes. Because the big challenge with what we've done so far is on the first day, we learned how to play a melody, right? And it's only 8 bars long. So you learn this cool melody and it's a lot of work, and you play that and you're like, I have 10 seconds of music. And so the next thing you can do is improvise on the form to say, well, this is an 8-bar song and it's in this key and we have this blues scale we can use and we know the chord progression from playing the thumb. So how can we solo for a couple of choruses? Well, now you've got maybe, I'm really sorry about this. Maybe you've got a minute of music. So, because you could play the melody in, and then you could solo for a few choruses, and then you could play the melody out. Well, today, we're going to look at how to expand that a little further. We're going to look at 3 things. The first is something I call the 7-step arc, which is the 7 essential steps that you would want to build into your arrangement from start to finish. Then we'll look at the 2 parts of that 7-step process that we haven't talked about yet in these 3 lessons, which are a vamp, which is the kind of introductory figure that I played at the beginning of the tune just now, this sort of that's a way you can lean into the tune. That's the way you can take yourself out of the tune. That's the way you can kind of tread water in the middle of the tune. The vamps are really useful, and you hear them all the time. And then the other piece we're going to look at today that's new is called the shout chorus. And this is something that comes from, the term comes from 30s swing and big band arranging. The shout chorus in a big band chart was a climactic moment in the tune when you've played the melody, maybe the singer sung a couple of verses, people have taken solos, and then the whole band gets together and everybody plays on this big rhythmic riff. And it sounds like shouting. It's not because everybody in the band is, like all the saxophones, trumpets, trombones, they're all like hammering away at this thing. So when you go up on the guitar by yourself and you've been playing single note licks down here, and then suddenly, you get to the end of the chorus, and you're playing along, and it's very cool and very groovy, and you're a very laid-back person, and then that 4-bar moment, boy, this sucks. That 4-bar moment is the guitar equivalent of a shout chorus, right? It's taking these chords and playing this rhythm and just not letting up until you get to the end of the phrase. So what it does is it gives your whole tune a safety net. Because let's say you get in and you play an intro and you play the melody and you play a solo, and maybe the solo's okay, but maybe you're not full of great ideas that day. But you've got this destination you're leading to. You know you've got this shout chorus worked out. And then no matter whether the solo is good, bad, or indifferent, before you wrap up the tune, you've got this kind of exciting little present for the audience, right? You've worked out this thing that's going to really be great. And it's not improvised, and that's okay. It's part of your arrangement, and it's part of what's going to make the tune sound great. Everything in music is about contrast. Everything's about constants and variables. If you're going to have a solo, which is unpredictable and variable, have some constants in your arrangement as well. Be like, this is the vamp I'm going to play. This is the shout chorus I'm going to play. This is how I'm going to get in and out of the tune. And then you can isolate and say, well, and these are the two choruses I'm going to solo on. This is where I'm going to take a risk, and then here's where I'm going to recover if that risk doesn't go like I wanted it to. So let's get into it. I've got some stuff to show you that's very specific. And if you haven't downloaded the tab, I've put it. I put a link up at the top of the chat. It's also in the information window, just below the video on YouTube. And feel free to post questions as we go. I'm going to teach for a while, and then I will pause and look at the chat and answer questions. And if I'm not like looking right at the camera, it's because I'm like keeping an eye on the chat. I'm making sure my guitar is like in the window and all these kind of dumb logistical things. So let me pull up the lesson, and let's go over here. Oh no, let's not do that yet. Hang on. One of these days I'll get this right. As my friend Ronnie Arbo likes to say, let us know if things get too slick and professional. So here we go. And just because I saw it pop up, I'm happy to explain what the 5 stands for. There are 5 essential elements to focusing on playing fingerstyle. And they are the groove, voicings, knowing your way up and down the neck and where the chords lie, your repertoire itself, improvising, and arranging. Those 5 things. If you can break it down to those things. So on Thursday we worked on groove, right? With using the horizontal 3-step to build up the groove, pull the song apart and put it back together. We looked at the essential syncopations. And then yesterday we looked at improvisation. And you can go back and watch these videos. They're still live on the channel for another 4 or 5 days. The improvisation piece we looked at yesterday with those 5 essential phrasing, different ways to phrase, and how to put them together and use that kind of modular approach to improvising. Today we're going to look at arranging. And so along the way, it's absorbing some information about how the neck is put together. And then finally, the goal of all that is to build your repertoire, really. Like, the reason anybody picks up the guitar is to play songs, right? So, that's what it's for. So I've got oh my gosh, is that Nate Rowe? Nate Rowe, bass player from Austin? Good to see you here, man, and have a safe trip home. Great to see people also from so many places around the globe. I saw that as I was checking in, and lots of familiar folks from the Fingerstyle 5. So if you have questions about that, you can ask folks like Jim B and folks like Jarl and from Norway, and lots of folks here who can tell you anything you want to know about it. Top Cat's here, Don Myers, all these folks. Henriette was a longtime member. She knows all about it. She can tell you. So anyway, let's get to it. Here is where we're going to start. I said, here is where we're going to start. Okay, so I'm just going to try to keep the chat window up at the same time, which is kind of a magic trick. Okay, so here's the 7-step arc. This is just a term that I made up, but the idea is you want your arrangement to have an arc. You want it to have a shape that kind of starts and builds and peaks and then resolves. So these 7 steps are one way to organize it. You'll notice that some of them I made interchangeable. And the whole idea here is when I started thinking about how to put a repertoire together, one of the things that I came up against is a lot of people feel like they've memorized stuff from tab and they're stuck just playing it note for note. So I didn't want to just be one more person. I mean, and the people who write great arrangements and put out great tab make wonderful stuff. And some of them are good friends of mine who write killer arrangements, and a lot of people get a lot of enjoyment out of learning their arrangements, and I have too. However, I wanted to create something that was a little bit more flexible so that at the end of the day, you could feel like you had put something together. And also to take you under the hood and say, well, here's this finished product, but here's how someone gets to that finished product. And this is kind of how I think about it, which is you want to start with an intro, which might be a vamp. I'm going to explain my definition of a vamp in a moment. Then you could play the fundamental version, which is the basic version of the tune we learned on Thursday. Then you could play an embellished version for the second time through, which is sometimes just as simple as, okay, I've played through the tune one time, Now I'm going to add in maybe a little bit of motion in the bass, maybe a couple of chord substitutions. If you go back and look at that embellished arrangement in the booklet, I think it's on around page 5 or 6, you can just look and A/B it with the fundamental version and see how it's different. But I can tell you right now that if the fundamental version keeps the bass playing every, on the A chord we're just playing A, on the E chord we're just playing E, on the embellished version there are some more movement in the bass. It's more syncopated. So there are some variations and some ways to open it up. And that means you can play through the melody a couple times instrumentally and it will sound cool. It's the equivalent of singing 2 verses to the song. Now you might be a singer and you're learning this arrangement so you can sing over it, and that's cool. Then you only really need one accompaniment pattern to take you through the first few verses, because the change in the words is going to give you that arc. But if you're playing instrumentally, this is one way to do it. So you got the vamp, the fundamental, the embellished, then you can take a solo. Now you're already way into the tune. So you notice that the solo is not the majority of the tune. It's a small part of the tune. So you solo, and then you do this idea of a shout chorus, like a prearranged climactic moment that you can kind of count on in the tune. And then you might pull it back to the vamp, and then go out with the embellished version of the melody. Or you could do it the other way around. You could go from the shout chorus right into the melody, and then vamp out, which is what I did on the way in just now this morning. So I finished the tune. And I just went into this 2-chord vamp and, added a little improvising into the vamp. Right? And that takes you out. So it gives you this structure. And because the vamp is kind of variable in length, and because the solo is kind of variable in length, and because the shout chorus, you could play it once, you could play it twice. Even though you've got this fixed arrangement, there's some flexibility and some room for, self-expression and feeling like it's your tune and it's going to go the way that, the way it sounds good to you. So let's get into, we've talked about the fundamental version, and you've got the embellished version in the handout. We've talked about soloing. And we've talked about, of course, the embellished again here. So really, today our job is to learn about the vamp and the shout chorus and how to integrate them into this 7-step arc structure. So let's do that. So here are just some things about a vamp, just some definitions. The vamp is a chord progression, and it exists outside of the tune itself, right? It's something that you add. An intro, an outro is something that you add to the structure of the tune. So you're not bound by the form of the tune. You don't have to follow the chord progression of the tune with the vamp. In fact, you're usually extracting a little bit of the tune and using that as your vamp. So it often will either rock between 2 chords, like very common to start on the 1 and go to the 5 and just go back and forth. Or sometimes a short cyclical progression, which is hard to say 5 times fast, so I'm not even going to. But often that's like the last two bars of the tune. The turnaround, sometimes people will say, well, we're going to start with a tag, which just means like taking the last 2 bars and doing that in a cycle, which you notice is really just another way of getting from 1 to 5 and back. Now, the bass can be typically one of 2 things. You can have a pedal point, which is one of those classical music terms. It comes from organ players who would hold down one note with a foot pedal while they did all kinds of crazy cadences and stuff on top. And so for our purposes, a pedal means keeping one bass note going while other things happen on top. So you could have and that doesn't sound so great, right? But turn off the phone. Turn off your phones when you're doing a broadcast. Okay. Or, but you could pedal on the 5. Different things like that. Or I can't remember, I think there's at least one pedal point thing in here. If you want to go from 1 to 4, the pedal point sounds particularly good. Right? Because this note is in both the 1 and the 4 chord. Right? Taking the blues scale and harmonizing it. Voicings. So voicings is just another way of saying chords. I mean, every chord there's more than one way to voice a chord, right? This is an A chord, and this is an A chord, and this is an A chord, and a 7 chord. And the term voicing, again, comes from classical music when people thought of chords as something that people sang, you know, because the earliest music that had harmony was choral music with, you know, people singing the different parts, the high parts, the middle parts, the low parts. So a voicing, it just means the voices of the chord are the different notes that are in the chord. So you can voice an A chord with the root and then the third and then the fifth, or you could voice it with the third and then the fifth and then the root. You could voice it with, you know, the fifth and the flat 7 and the third. All these different ways you could arrange the notes of the chord. So once you know that, you can have either a common tone. Say if you're going from 1 to 4, you might decide to have this note on top of all your chords. So I'm playing an A chord, and I'm playing a D chord, and I'm keeping this one note in common on top. Now the other thing you might do is have something called a guide tone line, which means that as the chords shift, you try to travel in a specific direction with as small steps as possible as you go. So you might go from A to E to A to D. And so as you go through the chords, on top, you're hearing this. And so you get this climb, and it gives your ear something to hear, and you're going, huh, the chords are changing, and there seems to be some logic to the way they're changing. And that's kind of cool. So the guide tone line could also go down. And that's going through the same chords, but now we've got this little chromatic descending line, meaning chromatic meaning going by half step. Right, so you could have that going on. And finally, the groove is mostly going to be quarter note, right? But you could also have an ostinato, meaning a short repeated rhythm that's kind of syncopated. And that would be a different kind of vamp. So let's get specific and look at a few particular vamps. So this vamp, I think I talked about on Thursday, but if I didn't, it's the vamp that I played on the way in playing the tune today. So we're just going between A and E, and I'm using an A6 chord here with the third and the 6 and the root, grabbing that with index, middle, and ring, then using the open high string, and then I'm going to an E7 sharp 9, the purple haze chord, with the third, the flat 7, and the sharp 9, and then going to the open E again. So in a way, I've got kind of a common tone on top because I keep hitting this open high E string. But the bass is just rocking between A and E. And that's really the whole thing, just those first 2 bars. But in the second 2 bars, there's a little bit of breathing room so you can play a little lick in there. Watching yesterday and saw those scale diagrams, this is just an A blues scale. And you could put anything in there that you've got time to reach. And that's one of the fun things about a vamp, right? Is you're not having to improvise a whole solo, but there's this little pocket where you can play around and you can do something fun and you can try different things out. And you only need one little lick at a time because you've got this very defined space to work in. So one lick, right? One measure, one lick. So that's one kind of amp where it's rocking between two chords. Here's a short cyclical chord progression. So here we've got and so here we're just going from an A7 to a C7, and the bass is moving, it's not pedaling, to a B7 to a B flat 7, right? And so these are, you're basically playing 1, 6, 2, 5, right? A7, F sharp 7, B7, E7, which is a really typical kind of turnaround figure. Except when we get to the F sharp, we're going to substitute C7, and then we're going to go to the B7, and then when we get to the E, we're going to swap in B flat 7. And that gives us this chromatic. So now our guide tone line is in the bass, which is very satisfying to our ears to hear this like, yeah. So, and then there's just some rhythmic syncopation. And if you remember the lesson from the first day, go back to the very first page of the handout where I talk about the 4 different rhythms that you can play. Here's playing on the ands, right? 1 and 2 and now we're gonna play on the downbeats. 3, 4. Now we're gonna play on the downbeat. 1, 2, and 3. Oh, I guess the bass is going down there. Oh no, it's going to 6. Okay, so it looks and sounds complicated, but it's just these 4 chords, and it's just one of those. It's all built out of those basic rhythms at the beginning. So that's a short cyclical progression. Here's a vamp from the 5. So we're going to pedal on the E, right? We're going to play E the whole way through. That's the pedal tone. And then we're going to have, oh no, we're going to go back to A, sorry. We're going to have E for 2 bars, and then we're going to have this rocking from A to E a couple of times. So we're going to have this. Sorry. So here we've got this chord, which we're vamping on the low E and breaking it up with the fingers, same E7 sharp 9 chord as before, and using the open high string. And now the licks are going to come in these 2 bars. And that's just A blues, right? And then we're just kind of hitting some chords on the offbeats with some bass notes and then repeat. And now a different lick. And now notice that there's a little space here at the end so we can go right into the melody. So that's 4 different ways you could set up the tune. The trickiest thing is to keep in mind the melody you want to play the tune at in the first place, so you don't start off the vamp too fast, because this one you might go like, oh yeah, that's great, and then you're playing along at this tempo, and then the melody comes in and it sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks. So one thing to practice is, just not rushing when you're working on these vamps. I mean, playing something too fast is a good problem to have because you can always slow it down. It's easier to slow things down in a way than to speed them up, but just something to keep in mind. So, just looking back at our chart then, now we've got 4 different vamps. Now you could use one vamp as your theme for the tune and put your vamp here and put your vamp here and maybe put it in here somewhere. Or one thing I like to do sometimes is pick a vamp for the intro and the outro and then pick a different vamp in the middle. So like I might start with this one and that's going to be my theme, taking the tune in and out. But when I get done with the solo maybe, or when I get done with the embellished maybe, before I jump into the solo, and then be off and running into the solo. So it provides this kind of break, this kind of setup for what's going to come next. So those are some places you can use the vamp. And now let's look at the shout chorus. So again, the shout chorus has its origins in big band music and swing music from the 30s. I mean, you can hear small groups, like if you have those Benny Goodman recordings with Charlie Christian on guitar, there's a lot of shout chorus stuff in there. They would go into these riffs at the end of the arrangement where they're all, like, it's usually, maybe Benny Goodman and Charlie Christian and Cootie Williams all playing the same, right? And so clarinet and guitar and trumpet are all like sort of hammering away on that. And then, in comes Lionel Hampton. He's like, doing this fantastic vibe solo on top of it. So it provides this background, right? But everybody's coming in on that thing. So you'll hear it in small group stuff. It doesn't have to be a million people. And so that's why it works on the guitar as well. Like it creates that feeling that you're doing something organized. So a few characteristics about the shout chorus. First, unlike the vamp, the shout chorus follows the form. So it's built on the same structure as the melody and the solos. It follows the chord progression. You really don't have the same kind of latitude as you do with the vamp to come up with your own chord progression when you're doing the shout. The bass, likewise, is going to move with the progression. I mean, you could do something with a pedal point, but for the most part, just think of this as the rule for now. Guideline is to move with the progression. Again, the groove is going to pretty much be quarter note. So for all these 3 rules, you're kind of sticking to the form of the tune. But here is where you have more latitude. You could experiment with both common tone and guide tone lines in your chord voicings. And you could include passing chords, and you can include chord substitutions. So coming up with different ways to think about the harmonies underneath the melody, as long as they come from something based in the tune and they end up somewhere real. So let's look at a few hands-on shout choruses. And all of these are going to be, they're all 4 bars long. Because one other thing about the shout chorus is it's often used to set up contrast between the band, in this case, the chords on top, and a soloist. So the idea was someone would be soloing in the ensemble, and then the band would come in with the shout for maybe 4 bars of an 8-bar section, and then the soloist would continue afterwards. So you get this back and forth between the shout and the soloing. So we can, do our version of that by playing 4 bars of shout and then going back into improvising. So in a way, the shout is an extension of your solo. Maybe on the 2nd or 3rd chorus, you have this prepared 4-bar thing, and then you're going to finish out the last 4 bars with more improvising. So here's the first one. I already kind of demonstrated this, but I'm just going to take A7. I'm going to play the same bass that I did for the melody and for the improvising, which is 4 beats of A, 4 beats of E, back to 4 beats of A, and then I'm actually going to stay on A for the D chord and play D7 over A, because I want the depth and the body of the A string. It's part of the chord, it's the 5th, and since we're coming back to A anyway in bar 5, it'll sound good. You could go to an open D. Sometimes that doesn't feel like it has enough weight, and especially during a shout chorus, I feel like it's worth it to play, the slash chord, the D7 over A, rather than like move the bass up, and it's kind of a cool sound. So I'm going to play the same rhythm all the way through, which is triplets. This is not a rhythm we talked about on Thursday, but it's 1 and 2 and So we've got a pinch on beat 1, and then 2 more notes afterwards on the and the So instead of counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and So that's the triplet feel. So this is going to sound like this. Whoa. Let me play it one more time. This is what I get for trying to read and play at the same time. So. Playing this wrong? Yeah, I know it starts here, sorry. Last time. Am and into the solo. All right, so we've got A7, and then we've got E7, and then we've got A7 again. And then we've got these chords coming down. It's a D chord with the 9th on top. E is the 9th of D. And then, so that's a D add 9 chord. And then this is another D chord with the 9th and the 7th. No, the 9th and the 3rd and the 7th. It's one of my favorite voicings. And then a D6, and then a D9. So you get this climbing melody. This is your guide tone line going up. And then coming down, we have another melody. Right? So that's cool. So that gives the whole thing a kind of structure. One more time. Oh, and in terms of the technique, you could either grab each string individually, index, middle, and ring, kind of claw kind of thing, or you could brush up on everything, which is a little more old school. So. Come back around and do it a second time. So that's one kind of shout chorus. Here's a variation using sort of chord substitutions, getting more into 6ths and 9ths. Someone asked about like the chords sliding up and down the neck. I did do a whole lesson on this early on my YouTube channel, talking about, if you go and look for a lesson called Western Swing Chords on the Blues, I explained about this idea of a 6th chord can be taken down a whole step and it turns into a 9th chord, and you can do that with a chromatic step in between, and you can do that for all 3 6th chords on the top 3 strings for that one root. So here's A6 with the 3rd, 6th, and 9. And then here's A6 with the 6th, root, and 3rd. And then here's A6 with the root, 3rd, and 6th. And so this is based on those voicings plus using this voicing that we used in the previous shout for D. Now we're going to use it for E. Here's the 9th and the 3rd and the flat 7. So we've got the same rhythm basically. So A6, E9, A6 down to A9, A6 down to A9, and then D, F sharp in the bass, with a little blues lick. So all together we get, coming out of the turnaround, so again, we have this contrast of going up and then coming down. So there's this very thematic kind of use of the descent and the chromaticism and all of that. So that's one more, that's another one. And here is one with some chord substitutions and some common tone voicing. So this is a little more modern sounding because it's got some suspended chords in it. We're going to take the A7 and play A sus4. So taking the 3rd and raising it to the 4th. And then using the open B string, which is the 9th, and the open high string, which is the 5th. And then we can do the same kind of suspension on the E chord by taking the G sharp and raising it up, the 3rd to the 4th, and then back to the A. And then do the same thing with the D, and again using the A in the bass. Right, so there's a D sus, there's the 4 to the 3. So we get this. I'm gonna have to look at this one to make sure I play it right. So ordinarily the shout is like to build the energy, right? But this is a more introspective or reflective kind of sound. So if you were playing something that was a little more all out, so the whole idea is, you can really play with the mood within the song and really start to use some of these different colors and some dynamics to really mix things up. And dynamics are one of the great forgotten tools of playing guitar, right? Like, I mean, not really, but I mean, I certainly forget. Like, I think, oh, I'm playing this tune and I want to really like put it over and project it, and I forget how effective it can be to like bring back, bring back the volume and bring back the approach to something that's a little more like this, instead of just going all out all the time to play it like as intense as possible, as intensely as possible. Here's one last possibility, and I'm just gonna try and keep track of the time here so that I leave enough time for some questions. So let me just put a clock on here before I forget. So finally, this last one is more of an ostinato thing. Hello. Oh, did I not include the ostinato? Oh, I skipped one of the, it was back in the, I skipped this vamp. All right. Well, this is just an ostinato idea for a vamp that I forgot to point out, which is to have that kind of bass line leading you into the tune. And then you can put like some licks on top of it. So I just forgot to mention that one. So that's what I came to talk about. That's the shout chord. Well, that's actually, before we completely get out of here, let me go back and just go back one more time and just put this back in context. So now we've got the intro or the vamp, we've got the fundamental, we've got the embellished, we've got the solo. This is where the shout chorus goes, right, in spot number 5. And then maybe back to the vamp and then into the embellished, right? So you could put everything together like that, and you would have this complete arrangement. So here's a very truncated version of that. So maybe we'd have this. And then the melody. And let's say you sort of went into the embellished at this point on your second time through. Now you might do your solo. Maybe you've done a couple choruses of solo now and you want to go into the shout chorus. Back end of the form. And then another shout chorus. A little more soloing, bars 5 to 8. And then maybe this vamp. One that I just did. And then you're doing the last melody, and you can see that I sped up like crazy. So it feels a little fast. But now I'm going to go into my closing vamp, which is the same as my opening vamp. So those are all the pieces, very, shortened version of that, right? But of course you could spread it out. Play a complete fundamental version, a complete embellished version, play a few choruses of solo, and so on. You could stay longer on the vamp as well. But that is the idea. So, once again, this all sort of fits into a bigger context of, you want to be thinking about getting the groove really solid, using that horizontal 3-step approach of pulling apart the melody and the bass and putting them back together beat by beat. Then looking at how to improvise, and if improvising is new to you, using that modular approach, just learning one of those solos, looking at the phrases, taking it apart, learning to use those phrases as building blocks and how they fit into the tune. And then finally, putting all of that into this bigger context of the 7-step art so that you can put together a complete arrangement. And, you do this song by song. Every song is going to have a different form or a different chord progression or both. So even if you put several tunes through the same set of paces, and even if you use that same kind of arranging scheme, you can have enough subtle variations in it that doing this, you could put together 8 to 10 tunes in this style and have a whole set's worth of material. And if you sing, so much the better. You can use all of these tools to arrange vocal tunes as well. You just wouldn't play, in place of the fundamental and the embellished, you would just play more of a simple backup part while you sang. And then you'd have a way to play the melody as an instrumental break. You could even do some improvising. You could still have vamps. You could still have a shout chorus, all of that. But if you didn't want to, if you aren't a vocalist, then, you could put together, an hour's worth of instrumental, solo instrumental music that didn't sound like you were just noodling, because there would be the structure to it. You'd be playing specific tunes. You'd have these worked out arrangements with certain vamps and certain shout choruses and all of that. So it's a way to build a repertoire using these, 3 little systematic things: the horizontal 3-step to put the groove together, those 5 resolutions and the modular improvisation to build the solos, and then the 7-step arc to put the whole thing into a set of arrangements. So tomorrow, I'll be talking a little bit more about the Fingerstyle 5 membership, but right now, we've got a little time left. I would love to answer any questions that you've got about this material, either the material itself or how to put it together. I don't really see any questions yet, but feel free to drop them into the chat. And if there aren't any, then we'll just keep moving. Yeah, there will be, I just saw this comment from Stephen, missed most of the lesson, but looking forward to the replay. Yeah, there will be a replay of this, and these lessons will stay up through next Thursday. So, you can, and you can have, of course, download the PDF. You'll have notes on that for as long as you want. And then, the lessons will be up for, a week from the starting point. So, if you want to take notes or, just rewatch them, they're here. So, tomorrow will be 2:30 Central, during the afternoon. And what I'll do is basically do a screen share and show you, basically give you a tour of the membership and how it's set up, and just explain a little bit more about how it works month to month, what kind of material you have access to, what kinds of things you can work on, and how you can expect to kind of use the tools in there to move your playing forward. The basic idea is, it was initially really structured on this idea of well, here's, we're going to go through this process every month, and do a new song every month. That has turned out to be a lot of material. I mean, what we basically just covered in 3 days is a month's worth of lessons inside the Fingerstyle 5. But as you can see, it could take more than a month to go through all of that. So that's totally fine. A lot of people actually have chosen to use it as a way to learn the new song, and they spend a month working on the fundamental tune. That's, and for people who just want to learn more tunes and build their repertoire, that's kind of their thing. Then there are people who will jump in and just, within a couple of days, they're playing the fundamental version. Within a couple of weeks, they're posting a version, where they're improvising and doing all this stuff. But those people tend to be, I think, it seems to be the exception. But I'll talk about more of all of this tomorrow. Question from Sam. The whole series will stay up till Thursday, at which point it will go inside the membership, and so you could keep watching these lessons if you joined, but they'll be off of YouTube at that point. So they're up for a week for free, and you can hang on to the PDFs forever. Question from Glenn. Curious how and why you ended up in Austin and what you're doing there. Well, I'm missing the snow, which I know sounds crazy to anybody who's actually in the snow, but I grew up in New England, so it only snows once every 8 years here in Austin. We did have snowpocalypse last spring, and we got 3 or 4 inches, and that was kind of mind-blowing for everybody here. The thing about Austin that's kind of insane is things close Like my kids will get these notices that like school is starting late because it's cold. You know, I guess they're worried about like the roads freezing if it gets below 32 degrees, and nobody here has snow tires and nobody knows how to drive in the cold. But I always just seem kind of crazy to me that like they're shutting down. I mean, I walked to school and, you know, whatever, like it was 10 degrees with a wind chill factor of -5, and, you know, it was snowing, and we just went to school because if it wasn't a blizzard, they were like, heck, we'll plow it and you can get there. But, you know, here they'll like call off school for 2 hours because it's cold in the morning. But anyway, I'm sure they've got their reasons, whatever they may be. So what I'm doing in Austin, I'm doing a lot of this. I'm not doing a lot of performing right now because nobody is. But doing a little bit of recording and some composing work too. But primarily spending a lot of time doing these lessons, which I'm super enjoying. It's really fun to do. And you know, teaching is kind of enlightened self-interest. Like you learn. Like your own playing gets really dialed in when you try to teach things because you're having to like codify and explain things and go like, well, how do I do that? You know, like I never knew until I started teaching this kind of music, all these weird percussive and rhythmic things I do with my hand. You know, all these kind of the raking and because I started writing it out in tab and I was like, oh, if I take that stuff out, it's just. That doesn't sound right because there's just all this. And so when people in the chat, when I would do a lesson like this, they'd be like, well, what do you do? What's that? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. I guess it's that, you know? And that's just a thing I got from probably watching Roy Bookbinder play a rag, right? It's just, you know, dragging your finger back across the strings and then the last note, as you drag it back, your thumb goes underneath the string and braces itself on the next lowest string or on the bass of the guitar and comes up and snaps the string against the frets. And that's where that comes from. But you know, you wouldn't know that if you didn't have to stop and think about it, right? So, yeah. Let's see. Oh, more questions about the weather. Cool. Have you ever observed them putting sand down on roads? Oh, yeah, totally. Well, I mean, you know, they used to have these sand spreading trucks in New England, and they would just drive down the street, just, you know. But, you know, we'd already be on our way to school, so. From Jackson, I'm ready for the 12-bar lessons. Yeah, well, so, yeah, it's always a bit of both, right? Like, there are actually a lot of great 8-bar blues to play. There's an equally great number of 12-bar blues, of course. And I try to cover both, you know, in the past. And all the lessons that we've done in the membership are archived, right? So, I mean, House of the Rising Sun is an 8-bar blues, and Baby Please Don't Go is an 8-bar blues, and Sitting on Top of the World, which is also basically Come On In My Kitchen, is an 8-bar blues, or it's a 9-bar blues. You know, and the thing that's great about those, and the reason that sometimes let's see, there's a lot of them. Motherless Child is an 8-bar blues, Nobody's Fault But Mine, lots of great ones, right? And they make they're good songs to learn because they're really compact, right? 8 bars is not that big an ordeal. 12 is not that much more, right? But they're nice and compact, and they make nice arrangements. So I do a lot of them, and also because like they feel a little more exotic to me. Because like when I was learning to play, the only 8-bar blues I knew was Key to the Highway, and so having more of them to choose from is kind of fun. So, but yeah. Cover a lot of 12-bar blues inside the membership too. And if you go on my channel, there are a lot of lessons on 12-bar blues too. There are a lot of lessons on, you know, there's one, there's many, but, you know, some of the ones to try out. There are some There's one on the playing like a after hours blues feel in E, and there's some syncopated bass line lessons and how to play walking basses with the blues. And there's also a bunch of Travis picking stuff like, you know, how to play more chord voicings on a John Hurt groove or that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot to consider. But so from Sam, a month. I feel better now, struggling through fingering the progressions properly. Yeah, no, this is not material that I would expect anybody to figure out in a couple of days. And in fact, one of the reasons that I do my teaching in the membership context instead of as like, well, you know, like, can I just download these 3 hours of material and just like work on them on my own, is that learning to play fingerstyle is a slow burn, and it actually helps to set a broader set of expectations about it, like that it's going to take a while to do it. And so, as somebody mentioned earlier, like the community is a big part of the membership, like that there's other people around working on the same stuff, asking the same questions, struggling with the same technique issues. Being around other people, I mean, playing fingerstyle guitar, it can be a kind of isolated thing. And so having other people around who are like, oh yeah, I had that problem with the F chord and here's how I finally learned it. Or just even to see someone say, oh man, that song took me 3 months also, can be really normalizing, because you don't know. I mean, I don't know when I'm sitting and practicing something, I'm like, should it take 3 months? Should it take a month? Should it take a year? You know, and having someone else say like, oh man, yeah, that took me a long time too, can make you realize like, okay. And then to have them say, but I finally got it, is also really encouraging. So, you know, being around other people that are working on the same stuff can be really helpful. Okay. From Floyd. Hey, Floyd. I would love to know how you get from playing the riffs and licks slowly and kind of poorly to clean and up to speed. Even with the metronome and going slow as I can, and still it's hard to keep my interest. I do work on things slowly, and I do play them with the metronome. One thing that can help is playing with the metronome on beats 2 and 4, because that's sort of a more musical thing. And I actually there's a whole lesson on that here on the YouTube channel too. But the basic idea is you set instead of thinking of the click as, and you know, 1, 2, 3. If you think of it as 1, 2, 3, 4, it's more groovy. It's more like the backbeat, like what the snare drum does, or what the mandolin shop does in a bluegrass band. Right? And that just, I mean, even just when I start trying to tap my foot on 2 and 4, I feel myself kind of leaning more into the groove. And so even if you're playing really slowly, if it feels more like a groove and less like an exercise, then it's more fun to do. So even if it's that can help. Also, hearing the subdivisions when you're playing slowly, meaning the internal rhythm between the beats. So instead of thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so that when you slow things down, it still has that kind of triplet pulse. Right? And so that can also, just feeling the time and feeling the rhythm can be a way to make playing slowly more interesting. And, you know, if it's more interesting, then you'll do it for a little bit longer. You can also break it up into little pieces, right? I mean, just work on a measure at a time or 2 measures at a time and then slowly string them together. I wish there was like a magic answer to getting, but you really, if you can find a way to make playing slowly interesting, then that will make it easier to sit with it. And, and then if you're using a metronome, then you can really you can ramp up the time in ways that are almost invisible. Just moving it up a tick or 2 every day. You won't feel it getting faster, but it will be getting faster. And so that's another way you can think about it. And just to really start focusing on the more you can get inside some of the extra literal qualities of playing, like if you can start to really become an aficionado of time and groove, and if you can start to really become interested in tone and sound and dynamics, then you'll be doing more than just right hand coordination or picking hand coordination, right? It'll be more about being musical. And so you can focus on being musical while you get your tempo, up to speed. So just trying to make it sound as good as possible. Just think about, this phrase, having some lilt to the phrasing. This one's pushed a little more dynamically. This one's pulling back. The pulse is still going. Really shaping that phrase. It's playing with more intention and just more musicality. And again, breaking things apart. Playing just the melody, playing just the bass. Just, grooving on what you can do at this tempo, at this moment, and enjoying that as much as possible. And, also listening differently. Like, whatever music you like to listen to, as guitar players, we tend to listen for the guitar, and we tend to listen for the licks, maybe for the chords. But, if you put on records you like and just start listening to the drums, if it's music with drums, or just listening to the bass, or listening to the way the singer phrases and listening to the way the singer, shapes the phrase and, how their dynamics sound, when they're loud, when they're soft, just listening for different things than just the guitar playing. Or when you're listening, if it is solo guitar, listen, just try to kind of close your eyes and listen to the feel and listen to the pulse and listen to the time and not listen so much to what note are they playing? So listening, I was just talking to my friend Brett about this last night, that listening is a skill just like playing is a skill, and you get better and deeper at listening the more you do it, and the more consciously you do it, then you just start to hear more. And really, the more you can hear, the more you can play. If you can't hear, the very first time I played, I heard myself recorded. Well, I guess I'd made little cassette recordings, but the first time I played in a studio, I was probably 22 or 23 in a big 24-track studio playing on a record. And, I played this part, or I played this solo, and, in the engineering room, they were like, okay, could you lay it back and play it out a little more behind the beat? And I was like, I don't know what that means. I literally didn't know what they meant as far as playing on top of the beat, playing behind the beat, playing right on the beat. It's still a little vague to me, even though if I really think about it, I can do it. And I can hear it when it's happening, In the end, they basically, they took my solo and they ran it through a digital delay, and they only printed the delayed part. They were like, look, we're gonna lay you back for you. And so they basically took what I did and just printed it to tape 30 milliseconds behind what I had played, and it sat in the pocket just great. And I was like, well, I guess I play on top of the beat, But, for the last 30 years, I've just listened and tried to learn and played with a metronome and just tried to soak up anything I could about what it means to play behind, on, or on top of the beat, and just tried to listen to what it sounds like when people are doing it. So, it's listening for good time and listening for the difference between things played slowly and things played more up to tempo and listening to what makes a slow melody sound good. That's all part of it. Okay, here's some comments I want to get to. Stephen, for me at present, it's playing the same riffs over and over. Yeah, but if you slow them down, then you can identify your mistakes and find the weak spots and figure out where the seams are, where it's falling apart. But I know we've talked about that already. From Many Vibes, I tend to treat the slow learning phase in slow time like meditation and vibe, to blending with the hammer on and offs for vibe, to bending with hammer on and offs for vibe. Yeah. I mean, you have to sort of, zero in on what's beautiful about what you're doing at the speed you can currently do it. It is sort of meditative. And from Mike, Doc Watson said it took him 10 years to learn fingerstyle and it was hard work. There you go. Oh, good. Floyd, glad you like the answers, then it's helping. From Jackson, the triplet feel is very difficult for some of my friends in Europe for some reason. Pros who run circles around me with technique. Anyone has an idea why? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, except that it is another thing to kind of put consciously into your bag of tricks, right? And to recognize that, to do it, you have to sort of get to that an understanding of the whole idea of swing eighths and straight eighths, right? That some things feel like and some things feel like and those are both written as eighth notes. When they're written out, when we're looking at tab or trying to figure stuff out from a page. And one are straight eighths where everything is even, like they would be in classical music. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and sometimes they're written as what's called swing eighths, which means that the first eighth note of each pair is longer and the second one is shorter. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the swing eighth is, the foundational rhythm of jazz, right? It's that. And so, and it's based really underlying on a triplet feel. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and or like Stephen's saying, triplet, 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 triplet. But what's happening with swing eighths is you're only playing the first and third note of each of those triplets. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and So there's a relationship between straight eighths, triplets, and the swing feel, right? So it's just getting down in there and really getting to feel it in your hands and in your body. So. And just being able to sit there and manufacture one after the other and distinguish between them like that. There's a lot of really cool American roots music that doesn't have a swing feel, right? Like, all that New Orleans piano stuff. It's not swinging. It's not, but it's got all those syncopations, which are, the New Orleans thing is, built out of all these different elements, including a lot of, Caribbean and Latin elements. So those kind of crazy syncopations, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? Tons of syncopation there. But it's straight eighth notes, and it swings like crazy. It's very grooving. Professor Longhair, Dr. John, James Booker, these great piano players that just have feel for days. And some of it's swing eighth notes, and some of it is built out of what we would consider a straight eighth feel. But, there's all this music. There's tons of, from the 1940s on, there's a whole stream of jazz that's built on straight rhythms because it's based on these Cuban and Puerto Rican rhythms that people like Dizzy Gillespie brought into jazz. And so by the 50s and 60s, you have people playing these boogaloo rhythms like Lee Morgan's The Sidewinder, and they're playing, you know, all these jazz guys are playing some swing tunes, and then they're also playing things that they're either considering Latin or boogaloo or some other thing like that. So, you know. Right? So it's just straight eighth rhythm, but it's really grooving. So anyway, that's a whole other bunch of things to talk about. But thanks for the questions. These were great. Tomorrow, 2:30 Central, we'll talk about the Fingerstyle 5. We'll talk about how to build your repertoire. Talk about, you know, if that kind of ongoing approach would help you to work on the things you want to work on. And keep watching this if you want to go back through and work on any of the material in here. They'll be up through this coming Thursday. So thanks for being here. Great to see you all. And